Hello guys, I am back and we are going to keep reading this amazing science fiction thriller Found by Margaret Peterson Haddix. So last time we read, Jonah and his parents decided that they were going to go to this adoption conference that's only open to kids in the 3 towns that where the people on the survivors list have all moved. So Jonah thinks it's going to be a great opportunity to hopefully find some of those other survivors and talk to them and see what they know. And he and Katherine just convinced their parents that Katherine should come along with them. So we're going to pick back up on chapter 25 and see what happens. The next few weeks seemed to crawl by. Neither Chip nor Jonah got any more mysterious letters. Neither they nor Katherine saw anyone else appear out of nowhere or disappear into thin air. In fact, if it weren't for the butterflies that seemed to multiply in Jonah's stomach as October 28th approached, Jonah almost could have believed that his life had gone back to normal. He took another social studies test about Mesopotamia and Babylon this time. He attended an informational meeting to find out about 7th grade basketball tryouts. He went on a Boy Scout campout where it rained all weekend and 2 kids came down with bronchitis and coughed all night long until the scout leader gave in and called their parents at 5 a.m. Katherine and Chip stayed obsessed. "I figured out why you and Chip were adopted in different states," Katherine announced one night as Jonah was brushing his teeth. "Why?" Jonah said, through a mouthful of crust. "Think about it," Katherine said, loitering outside the bathroom. She spoke in a low voice as if she were afraid that Mom and Dad might hear her from downstairs. "There were 36 babies. If Mr. Reardon had dumped you all at one adoption agency, or even several adoption agencies all in the same city, there would have been a lot of talk. But you send 1 baby to Michigan, 1 or 2 to Chicago, 1 or 2 to Indianapolis. That's not so noticeable. There could be that many abandoned babies in each city at once." Jonah spit into the sink, bending low so she didn't see how the word abandoned stabbed at him. "I wasn't abandoned," he reminded himself. "I was sent on a plane." But was that better or worse than being abandoned? "So what do you think Mr. Reardon knows why we're all do you think Mr. Reardon knows why we're all being gathered together again?" he asked, mostly to distract himself from his own thoughts. "Is he doing the gathering? Is JB? Is E?" Mr. Reardon had all the kids' new addresses in Liston and Clarksville and Upper Tyson. Was he the one who wanted to force poor Daniela McCarthy to live on Robin's Egg Lane? "I don't know," Katherine asked, fiddling with a strand of her hair. "I'm not even sure Mr. Reardon knew about the survivors list." "It was on his desk," Jonah said. "But JB put it there," Katherine said, "not Mr. Reardon. Maybe he was just worried about us seeing the witnesses list." Jonah jerked his toothbrush back and forth across his teeth with unusual force. He spit again. "Katherine, it's all a big mystery, okay?" he said. "Maybe we'll never find out all the answers." "Or maybe we should figure out as much as we can now so all the final pieces will fall into place at the conference," Katherine retorted. Jonah frowned at Katherine's reflection in the bathroom mirror. The concentration in her gaze made her look like Sherlock Holmes about to solve his biggest case. Meanwhile, the toothpaste on her lips made it look like he was foaming at the mouth. Who's the crazy one, Jonah wondered, her or me? For his part, Chip kept finding excuses to ride past 1873 Robin's Egg Lane. The house there stayed closed up and empty. Chip also tried talking his parents into attending the conference. Embarrassingly, Jonah heard one of his attempts because Jonah had just stepped onto the Winstons' front porch, ready to ring the doorbell and ask Chip over to play basketball. "For the last time, no," a man's voice shouted from inside the house. "I've got a golf date that morning, and your mother has a spa appointment. We don't have 6 hours to waste on some namby-pamby, touchy-feely types who are just going to try to make us feel guilty for not being the perfect parents. Subject closed." Jonah stopped the doorbell. "You can go with us," he told Chip as soon as he opened the door. "I'll make my parents take you." Chip just nodded. October 28th dawned clear and crisp, the perfect autumn day. Jonah woke up earlier than he usually did for school, probably because Katherine was already up and banging around in the bathroom. He heard her turning the water on and off, switching the fan from low to high, jerking her towel off the towel rack in a way that rattled the rack against the tile of the wall. He stumbled out into the hall. "Today's the day," Katherine announced brightly as she dodged him to head back to her room, her hair wrapped in a towel. "Let's go, team," Jonah muttered under his breath because the tone of Katherine's words made them sound like they should be accompanied by cartwheels and splits and arms thrown victoriously up in the air. "Ah, geez," he whispered, leaning against the bathroom sink. "She really is a cheerleader." And it seemed suddenly that this was true. Not because she was an airhead or a hottie or a non-jock, but because she could throw herself so wholeheartedly into someone else's cause, because she could care so much and try so hard from the sidelines. How could he understand so much about his sister's identity and so little about his own? 3 hours later, the whole family plus Chip were all loaded into their minivan, headed toward Clarksville Valley High School. The weather's so nice it looks like they'll be able to do some of your sessions outdoors, Mom said, turning around to talk to Katherine in the middle seat and Jonah and Chip in the far back. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to the hike and outdoor confidence-building exercises, Katherine said. A baffled look spread over Mom's face once again. Katherine, those teen sessions really aren't intended for siblings of adoptees, she said. It's not too late to turn around and drop you off at home or at a friend's house so you're not a distraction for Jonah and Chip. Katherine turned around and raised her eyebrow at Jonah as if to say, you have to deal with this one. She won't be a distraction, Mom, Jonah said. Chip and I want her along, right, Chip? That's right, Mrs. Skidmore, Chip said. Mom still looked skeptical, as if she knew something was going on. But she turned around and began reading Dad the directions for getting to the school. Jonah had never been to Clarksville Valley High School. It was a huge new building backing up to a nature preserve on the very edge of the city. The street leading up to the school was lined with new subdivisions, with houses in various states of completion. Dad whistled. These neighborhoods are so new you can almost smell the paint drying, can't you? He said. Nice houses, huh? We're not moving, Jonah shouted from the back seat. Both his parents stared back at him. Who said anything about moving? Mom asked. Never mind, Jonah muttered. Act normal, he reminded himself. They parked close to the front door of the school and joined a line of parents and kids waiting to register at a table in the lobby. What did you do, adopt triplets? The woman in front of them asked when she glanced back. Katherine glowed at the suggestion she might be the same age as Jonah and Chip. No, Mom said, sounding a little reluctant to explain. This is our son Jonah and his friend Chip, whose parents couldn't come today, and our daughter Katherine, who's not adopted but wanted to be here to support her brother. Well, isn't that nice? The woman said. Mom, can we go sit down while you're registering? Jonah asked because he didn't want to hear any more of this conversation, and he could see people already filing into an auditorium. If they could just scout out some of the other kids, see if any of them were the ones named on the survivors list, then they'd have an advantage when they broke up into groups later. Okay, Mom said. Wait, you should get your name tags first, the woman in front of them said. Here. She passed back a stack of blank name tags and markers. Jonah's hand shook as he carefully wrote his name, Jonah Skidmore. His name had never looked so strange to him before, so alien, as if it really didn't belong to him. What if I really am supposed to have some other identity, he wondered, the identity of a boy who's missing, or from the future? Would I want to know that, or not? Hurry up, Katherine muttered beside him, jabbing her elbow into his side. We're going to run out of time. Jonah put the cap back on the marker, peeled the backing off the name tag, and slapped it on his chest. I'm ready, he said, though he didn't feel ready. The three of them drifted through the crowd, peering at the other kids' name tags. Sam Bentry? Nope. Allison Myers? Nope. Dalton Sullivan? There was a Dalton on the list, but the last name and the address and phone number were cut off, Chip whispered excitedly. I could be right. Let's see if we can find anyone we're sure about before we try to talk to Dalton, Katherine said. We can get back to him at the end. They headed on into the auditorium. Right inside the door, they saw a group of kids who were laughing and talking together, as if they had known each other for years. They wore ripped jeans and dark sweatshirts and glared when Jonah stepped close, trying to read their name tags. What are you looking at? One of the guys jeered. Oh, Katherine giggled flirtatiously. Sorry, we're just looking for some kids we met online in an adoption chat room. We know their names, but not what they look like, and... She glanced around, lowered her voice conspiratorially. Our parents don't know we visit those chat rooms. Only dorks visit chat rooms, one of the girls said, looping her arm around the jeering guy's elbow. Jonah said, okay, thanks anyway, we'll leave you alone now. He pulled Katherine away. What are you doing? He asked, trying to get beat up? Oh, please, Katherine said, we have to have some cover story. That girl thought you were hitting on her boyfriend. So what? Katherine put her hands on her hips and stared defiantly at Jonah. Jonah's head swam. Didn't Katherine understand anything? What if he hadn't been there to protect her? Chip tugged on Katherine's arm and Jonah's sweatshirt. Come on, you two, Chip said. Cut that out. Let's keep looking. But Mom and Dad came through the doorway just then. At the front of the auditorium, a man stepped toward the podium on the stage. Take your seats, please, he said into the microphone. We've got a full slate of activities for the day, and I'm sure you're all eager to get started. Everyone began sitting down, even the group of tough-looking kids in the back. Jonah got a seat right on the aisle so he could peer over sideways at the kids in the next section of seats. The man at the microphone began talking excitedly about what a great turnout they had, what a great program they had planned, how well the County Department of Social Services worked. Jonah tuned him out. There was a Bryce Johnson on the aisle seat across from him, a Ryan, or was that Brian Crockett, one row up? Jonah wondered if he could write those names down, pass them along to Chip and Katherine, and get them to shake their heads yes or no without Mom or Dad's noticing. He felt a little guilty that he'd never studied the survivors list the way they had, that he hadn't made a single phone call to any of the other kids. Jonah turned his head farther so he could see the girl behind Brian Crockett. She had long blonde hair covering her name tag, but she chose that exact moment to flip her hair over her shoulder. Her name tag said Sarah. She flexed her shoulders, stretching in her seat and revealing the rest of her name tag. Sarah Puccini. Sarah Puccini, yes. Jonah remembered that name. It was one Katherine had told him when they were in the driveway playing basketball. So there was at least one other kid at the conference who'd received the mysterious letters, whose name was on the survivors list, who might want to hear what Jonah, Katherine, and Chip knew, and who might have information to share with them, too. Jonah turned to Chip beside him. Sarah Puccini, he whispered in Chip's ear, one row back. Chip's face lit up. On the other side of Chip, Katherine was already standing up. What do you think you're doing? Jonah muttered. Katherine looked at him blankly. They just said for all the kids to go back out to the lobby to start our activities, she said. Weren't you listening? Oh, Jonah mumbled. Mom leaned over the seats. It sounds like you guys will be eating your lunch out there on your hike, so we'll just meet you back here at 3, okay? Sure, Jonah said. Dad raised his hand from his armrest in a miniature goodbye wave and mouthed something that might have been, have fun. Jonah whirled around, hoping he could catch up with Sarah Puccini in the aisle, but her blonde head was already disappearing through the back door out into the lobby. Jonah joined the stream of kids flowing toward the lobby. Chip and Katherine were right behind him. The three of them rushed through the doors together. Where is she? Chip asked as the crowd came to a stop near the table where everyone had signed in. Jonah could see a woman quietly closing the door to the auditorium behind them, probably to keep the noisy cluster of kids from interrupting the adults program. Don't know, Jonah said, trying to stand on his tiptoes to get a better look. There was a blonde head right up front near the table. No, wait, is that Sarah over toward the side? How many kids do you think are here altogether? Chip asked. 50? Jonah guessed. 60? Angela said there were 36 babies on the plane, Chip whispered. We only had 18 names to start with. 19 if you count Dalton without a last name. Did Chip think they should start interviewing all the kids around them? Jonah could just imagine it. Gotten any strange mail lately? Ever seen anyone disappear? Know anything about time travel? He didn't think that would go over very well with the tough-looking crowd they'd already annoyed. Those kids were standing in a clump off to the side. Now that he was behind them, Jonah could see their sweatshirts all had skulls on the back. Nice. All right, a short, enthusiastic man with wiry hair called as he dashed halfway up a stairway between the registration table. He spun around to face the crowd. Can everyone see and hear me now? Mumbles. Yeah, sure. Someone, Jonah thought it was a kid in the skull group, muttered, Why would we want to? Great, the man enthused, ignoring or not hearing the surlier comments. I'm Grant Hodge, a caseworker at the County Department of Children's Services. There are so many of you, which is absolutely wonderful. I'm not complaining at all. But we've decided to break you up into 2 groups for our activities today. One group will come with me. The other group will go with Carol Malvo, over there by the door. He pointed. Wave at everyone, Carol. A woman with short, dark hair lifted her arm and waved vigorously. One of us has to get in the same group as Sarah Puccini, Chip whispered in Jonah's ear. I know, Jonah said grimly. Mr. Hodge was pulling a list out of a folder. When I call your name, come stand behind the table if you're with me, or go over by the door if you're with Carol. Got it? Mr. Hodge was saying. I'll call my group first. Listen to all the names, Katherine hissed at Jonah and Chip. We've got to pay very close attention. Jonah missed hearing the first name because of Katherine. Shh, he glared at her. Jason Ardul, Mr. Hodge said. Andrea Crowell. Katherine grabbed Jonah's arm and squeezed hard as a girl with light brown hair quietly slipped around the table at the front. Jonah and Chip both nodded and mouthed the words, I know, at Katherine. Andrea Crowell was a name they'd all recognized. Jonah stared at the girl to make sure he'd recognize her later on, too. She had her hair pulled back in 2 braids. The style seemed to suit her, though Katherine would probably say it wasn't very fashionable. Andrea was gazing down at her shoes, as if she was too shy to look out at the rest of the crowd. Maria Cutler, Mr. Hodge continued. Gavin Danes. Another squeeze from Katherine. This one, a surprise. Jonah hadn't remembered any Gavin. Jonah got 8 more squeezes before Mr. Hodge reached the middle of the alphabet. Katherine looked so excited she might burst, like a Miss America contest waiting to hear her own name called. Daniela McCarthy, Mr. Hodge said. Another squeeze, practically breaking Jonah's wrist this time. Jonah winced, squeezed Katherine's arm back even harder, and glanced around, because Daniela McCarthy was someone he really wanted to see. But no one was shoving her way forward in the crowd. No one was stepping aside to make way for the girl who'd been so upset about moving. Daniela McCarthy, Mr. Hodge called again. The name hung in the air while everyone looked around. Jonah saw Katherine bite her lip, grimacing. Then, suddenly, decisively, she pulled the name tag off her shirt and crumpled it in her hand. The minute it was out of sight, she called out, "Oops, sorry, I'm Daniela." She gave a sheepish wave. "My bad, I wasn't listening." "Kat," Jonah started to call after her, to yell, "You can't do that." But she stamped on his foot as she shoved her way forward. The Kath turned into an ow, and then she was too far away from him to say anything. She slipped around the table and sidled up between Andrea Crowell and Michael Kostoff. "What did she do that for?" Jonah muttered to Chip. "Beats me," Chip muttered back. "If we're all in the same group because of this, and we don't get to talk to all the kids, she's in big trouble," Jonah fumed. Sure enough, when Mr. Hodge got down to the end of the alphabet, he finished up with, "And Jonah Skidmore and Chip Winston, you're in my group too. All the rest of you, go with Carol." Jonah stomped up to the front of the group, while everyone else around him, except Chip, was pushing back toward Carol. He slid up behind Katherine and hissed in her ear, "You go tell them you're in the wrong group right now, so you can talk to the survivors in Carol's group, or, so help me, I'll... He was too mad to think of an adequate threat. Katherine turned to him with troubled eyes. "Weren't you listening?" she whispered back. "There isn't anyone from the survivors list in the other group." Jonah blinked. His fury melted into disbelief. "What?" Mr. Hodge called out every single one of the 19 names we know, even Dalton Sullivan, who has to be the Dalton on our list, she whispered. "Jonah, we were being sorted." The way she said sorted brought out goosebumps on Jonah's arms. He forced himself to stay calm, to think back, his brain processing information he'd been too angry to fully take in before. Mr. Hodge had called out Sarah Puccini's name. The blonde girl was standing over by Anthony Solvers, a chubby boy with pimples. Haley Rivers was behind the table too, and Josh Hart, and Denton Price, and... "But there are other kids in this group too," he whispered urgently to Katherine. "It's not just kids from the list." Somehow, that detail seemed very important, something to hold on to. Jonah didn't feel like his brain was working very well at the moment, but he knew he wanted other kids around, non-survivors, ordinary kids who had nothing to do with the strange plane or ghost stories or mysterious letters. It was like he believed those kids could protect him. "Jonah, we never saw the complete list," Katherine reminded him. "Angela said there were 36 babies on the plane. I think Mr. Hodge called out 36 names." Jonah stared at his sister in astonishment. He didn't want his brain working properly now. He didn't want it to reach the conclusion it was racing toward. He wanted to stay numb and ignorant and safe. Most of all, he wanted to stay safe. Katherine spoke the words for him, shattering his hopes for ignorance. "I don't know. I can't be sure, but I think," she began. Her eyes were huge with worry now. "I think, except for Daniela McCarthy, they have all the babies from the plane back together again. Right here, right now. They have you." Alright, so that's kind of an intense cliffhanger to leave off on, but that is where we are going to stop for today. So I cannot wait to keep reading with you guys and see what happens, and if that happens to be a coincidence, or if it's really on purpose, and which side of the JB or E or Mr. Reardon struggle is in charge of this conference and has put them all together. So stay tuned for tomorrow's video, and we will keep reading. Bye, guys.